are live.
All right, welcome everyone. This meeting is called to order in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act. Notice of this meeting was sent to the Home News Tribune, the Star Ledger, and the Highland Park Planet on June 17th, 2021, and was posted on the borough website at www.hpboro.com and on the bulletin board of the Borough Hall, 221 South Fifth Avenue, Highland Park, New Jersey, on June 17th, 2021, and has remained continuously posted as required by law. As mayor, I preside over this meeting and may interrupt, warn, or terminate a participant's statement or participation in the virtual meeting if the participant's statement does not adhere to the 3 minutes provided to each participant for public comment, or if the statement is abusive, obscene, or irrelevant. All right, roll call, please.
Mayor Brill-Mittler,
Here.
Councilwoman Canavera, Councilwoman Foster, Councilman George, Councilman Hale,
Here.
Councilmember Hirsch,
Here.
Councilwoman Kim Chohan,
Here.
Special Counsel Bauman,
Here.
Planner Jim Constantine,
Here.
Borough Administrator Hover.
Here.
All right. May I have a motion to go into executive session regarding Cleveland Avenue developer negotiations after the public comment section of this meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilman Hale,
Yes.
Councilmember Hirsch,
Yes. Sorry.
Councilwoman Kim Chohan.
Yes.
Let the record reflect that Councilwoman Foster has joined us. And Councilwoman Foster, we were just voting on going into closed session at the end of the meeting. Okay, we have several discussion items on the agenda for this evening, and I'm going to start with the Upper Raritan redevelopment plan. I don't know if Terry or Matt want to discuss this.
I guess what I was hoping to do was kind of briefly just give an orientation. Matt, you can chime in, and then Jim was going to share a couple slides just to
Right.
orient folks. But this item stems out of a fairly recent rehab screening committee meeting. There was a property owner who wanted to present an idea for a parcel on Upper Raritan. I'll actually, if you don't mind, I'll share my screen and show you the area we're looking at for this discussion. Can you all see that okay?
Yes.
So we're talking about the property that came in to speak to the screening committee owner is that lot 16 and 17 on block 3801. That's our new tax lot there, our block. The Lubit All, I believe, is what the last business that was in there. Interested in doing a mixed use primarily residential development with some retail there. We had a good conversation at the screening committee with them, and the discussion was, kind of supportive, especially in light of the fact that in our master plan, we looked at Upper Raritan in particular as a place, and Jim will talk a little bit about this in a moment, where we could explore using redevelopment tool, because we have some pretty shallow lots and some constrained condition. Subsequent to that meeting, we heard that there was another property owner has purchased this other lot over here on 3802, interested in discussing very similar kind of redevelopment kind of goals with mixed use and residential. Again, very much in alignment with the master plan discussions we had. And so what we're bringing to you now is we want to discuss the possibility of developing a redevelopment area. And I'm not sure if I got the right slides, Jim, you'll have to tell me because you sent me a couple, for the area here these areas outlined in the red boxes, with the kind of red shaded being the areas where the property owners have expressed some interest and where we see some alignment. Matt, did you want to add anything before I jump into giving Jim some bandwidth on this?
No, just that the screening committee was, met, and that it was, I think, a very productive meeting, and shows that the screening committee is a good tool to sort of move things forward. So I don't really have anything other than add. So we'll let you go.
So Jim, should I show the other slides that you?
Hang on,
Yes,
just 1
please.
second, Terry, just 1 second.
Mhm.
Could you, Jim or Matt, just remind everybody of who the screening committee, what the screening committee is, who's on, representatives that are from other boards that are on it?
Sure, it's the representatives from the planning board, from the zoning board, from code, the borough's code office, and Main Street and Highland Park are all represented on that board, and it's really just an informal place to discuss, what potential developers are thinking, and then also to get sort of some initial feedback. There's no decisions made. There's no, it's really just a conversation. So
Thank you for that, Matt.
All right, Jim, should I switch my screen at this point?
Yes, please, if you could go to that second PDF. So,
The PDF or the PowerPoint?
oh, the slide, the PowerPoint, I'm
Okay,
sorry.
sure. Hold on 1 second.
Sure. So this is an opportunity to, again, look to the 2019 master plan and effectively put it into action in moving forward on really 2 blocks of Upper Raritan, the east side of the street between South 10th, across South 11th, and then to the corner of Maryland.
Can you see as the
Avenue.
main slide, this town-wide view of Highland Park?
So
Yes,
it's
but you're in
yes,
presentation mode, I think.
Is that the wrong screen? Remember, we had this issue when Jim did it. Here, I will. Sorry, I'm gonna have to figure this one out for the future, but hold on. Gotta get out of this. All right, sorry about that, folks. I'm just gonna leave it in. Can you see this PowerPoint now? This
Yeah.
slide?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just gonna leave it this way because when I put it in slideshow view, it screws up, so.
So
Sorry.
the properties that we're referring to, the 2 blocks, are the ones that are shown in red. Thank you, Terry. And we just showed slide 2, which was basically the properties. I did want to indicate that the property that came in on block 3801 met with screening. The other property, 3802, is posted escrow, and they were interested in. And we have felt that to the degree that we can coordinate these 2 together, it really makes more sense to be a more coherent approach to dealing with these first 2 blocks. The area that's shown in sort of tan or light orange in between are the intervening parcels, and I think it may make sense to include those as perhaps a later phase, but so that we can be, again, more comprehensive from South 10th up to Maryland Avenue. If we go forward 1, we'll look at the existing land use out there, which includes in pink, the large at the bottom is auto commercial. The orange color is office uses, and this includes obviously the other side of Raritan. The light yellow is single family homes, a real pale yellow. The brighter yellow are 2-family, and then there's sort of a tan color for multifamily down on South 10th. So there's a mixed condition along this whole stretch. If we go forward 1, we can look at the existing zoning. These properties exist within the C commercial zone, with the exception of if we included the what I would refer to as the intervening parcels. There's one on South 11th that's in this single family zoning. And this was something that was identified as an issue to be resolved as we move forward in the master plan. If we go forward to the next slide, we actually show the master plan. And the vision here was really to try to transform outdated commercial corridors into safer, more attractive and livable, complete street by enriching the mix of uses, enhancing the gateway and the sense of arrival, because this is the corridor that comes downtown. And what you see illustrated here in this image, the existing condition is the small image in the lower left of this page, is basically a sketch over illustrating the sort of streetscape and the road diet that's been discussed with NJDOT, that's identified in the PED bike plan that would basically reduce this stretch of Upper Raritan into 2 lanes, put in ped and bike accommodations, and make it a safer, slower, more livable street. So if we go forward to the next slide, there's an image in the bottom right from the PED bike plan that was incorporated, but there's this a whole bunch of issues that are identified out in this corridor that I think everyone who knows this part of town understands. There's challenges, it's high speed, the pedestrians aren't accommodated, there's no bicycle accommodation, it's unsafe. The neighborhoods really don't come out and embrace the corners because of the high speed traffic that's there today. And so there's a great quote here. It says, this part of, and this came from our outreach, from our public workshops or the survey we did for the master plan, this part of Highland Park typically feels excluded, as if it's part of Edison, and that something should be done to tie it into the rest of town. So if we go forward to the next page, we actually identified these sites that you can see in brown, the 2 that are largest on the upper right, were identified as potential redevelopment and infill sites. So again, when I say this is an opportunity to put the master plan into action, the master plan identified, this wasn't trying to be comprehensive and specific of every possible site, but it was basically a snapshot through just these few blocks of the corridor, showing that on both sides of the street, there's lots of opportunity for improvement. And in fact, if you look at the images on the right side, you see that first sketch we showed you in the top right with the bike lane, but the image in the middle, you see that there's a 3.5 story building, sort of mixed use on the ground floor, upper level loft style apartments to frame the street and redevelop. In fact, one of the sites that we're talking about right here was illustrated right there in the master plan. And then that bottom image is just the whole notion that we want to try to create some semblance of, even if it's small, public space along this corridor as we basically transform some of these sites in a place that would make it inviting and safe for residents who live in the blocks on both sides of the street to come out and basically reclaim this stretch of highway back as a livable street that's a gateway into the downtown. And then the last slide on the bottom basically illustrates the strategies that we outlined for this in the master plan, which included, transforming this into a gateway, also custom tailor infill and redevelopment using the redevelopment plan tools. So that's what we're talking about doing here, along with a whole series of other strategies, a lot of which we can touch on. And again, there's an example of on the left of both the existing zoning and the existing land use. And you can see on that long image in the center there, that the pink area, that's the commercial zoning that exists up and down the corridor. One of the things we identified in the master plan is the fact that it's not consistent. It's at different depths, the lots change. So it's a real challenge there. It's difficult to have existing zoning that really works effectively. And I think this is hopefully the first of several sites that will come forward to potentially transform and use the guidance that's in the master plan, which would be what we would recommend be used in a redevelopment plan for this area.
So I think the next step, what we'd be looking for some feedback on, can I stop the screen share so we can see each other a little better at this point?
Yes, I'm done. Yes.
Okay. We would want to kind of ask Jim to go back to his team and pull together a proposal for a redevelopment plan for the areas that we just outlined that then council could review. And hopefully, if we think it's a good proposal, we can go ahead and authorize it at a future meeting.
Okay.
So is that generally?
Does anybody have any questions for Terry or Matt or Jim?
Or,
Joe?
Yeah, I just have a quick question. Are those parcels all in a redevelopment area or are they in the rehab area?
They're in the rehab area.
So should we be thinking about putting in the redevelopment area?
do we need to, if we can adopt the plan under the rehab statute, was the assumption we were operating under?
Don't need any tools, any other tools?
Can't hear you, Joe.
As long as it depends on what other tools we need. I mean, is there going to be a need for any other tools, a pilot?
That hasn't been our
We
discussion.
have not, that hasn't been in part of the discussions at this point, so.
Okay.
Anybody else? Okay,
All right, so you'll hear more from us on the, Jim, you've got the green light to at least pull together a proposal for our review. All right,
Thank you.
okay, parking consultant RFP, I assume that's Terry.
yeah, I just wanted to give everybody a quick update. I know there's been some discussion about this in various forums, so I just figured I'd use the opportunity. We meaning myself, Joe and Jim, have met with kind of what we believe are our two front running candidates. We did get 3 very credible responses to our RFP. We winnowed it down to 2 candidates and we met with them on Zoom. And the truth is, I had hoped to do a series of reference calls to some of their references before making a recommendation. I wasn't able to do so. So really, we've got a good idea of who we like, but I do think before I make a formal recommendation on behalf of the staff, I need to do that due diligence. And I just want to let you know, I hope to be able to do that in the next couple of days, after which I will certainly be presenting kind of our kind of recommendation to the mayor and Councilman Hale, so that at a future meeting, we could make an award for those services that we've been discussing as in. And just to be clear, I guess I should have said this up front for those of you that this would be related to our downtown redevelopment plan that we'll be talking about next. Would be establishing a baseline and doing some evaluation of different parking strategies for the borough as it pursues these redevelopment, implementing redevelopment. So I was very encouraged by the candidates we got. I think we have really good options, and it wasn't what price was the big issue. It's really about who the right fit is, and that's what we just need to kind of finish the due diligence, and then we'll be having a recommendation to you shortly.
Terry, do me a favor, I forgot to mention this earlier. Could you get me a list of the municipalities that these parking consultants worked with?
Absolutely, it's in all of their responses. So I was going to share their proposals as well with you.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, anybody have a question on the parking consultant RFP? Matt?
Is there a price, is there a budget range for the consultant?
Well, to be honest, the process we used was one where we didn't do a bid. We solicited proposals, which we're allowed to do under, we have a qualified purchasing agent in the borough, and that threshold is 44,000. So my hope was we wouldn't go exceed that, because we would have had to go out and get bids and do it a more structured way. The good news was all of them came in below that considerably. So, but based on the kind of finalists we're looking at, under $35,000.
Anybody else have a question? Matt Hirsch?
Sorry. And do we have a specified time frame as to when we want a consultant to produce some feedback?
We did discuss some of that in our interviews. I think there was some sense that for some of the baseline data that September would be a better time than summertime to collect some of that information. But I mean, but all of them represented that as soon as the award was made, they could get started on data collection. There's a lot of baseline work to be done before they're out there counting and doing other things. So I don't believe we established a firm endpoint. What we would do is have a kickoff and map that out. But all of them seem like they could accomplish the tasks within several months of getting started. But I don't know if this is where you're going. We weren't intending on having that before we move forward with the plan, which we're about to talk to.
That's kind of what I had in mind.
I had a feeling that
Okay.
might have been, it's kind of our contention that we don't need to, it's going to inform how we implement the plan. It doesn't necessarily, our plan leaves us enough flexibility to adjust based on what we find out from these studies and from their recommendations.
Terry, or I guess the professionals on the call tonight, we have a parking study, not an extensive one that was done several years ago by a former planner that we had. Does it make sense to share any of the parking studies that we've done? Also, Phil worked with a group to do a parking study.
Absolutely. That would be part of that initial work. We would do the data dump of everything that
Okay.
we have that might be relevant to their analysis. And absolutely, we're not going to, put aside work that may have already been done. That would be helpful to us.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, any other questions on the parking consultant? Okay, Jen, could you let the record show that Council President Phil George is now on the meeting?
Mayor,
Got
just let
it.
me know, I was monitoring before from one of the other links, but it was only having me in as a participant, not as a panelist. So I was going back and forth. I finally got it.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry about
I was
that. I
here
know
at
it's confusing.
7:05.
Okay. All right, so the next topic is the downtown redevelopment plan for tracks A through D. Terry?
Yeah, I think Joe was going to, basically we wanted to get you up to speed as to where we are, and then we're going to go through some amendments that we've been contemplating, both after speaking with the governing body, but also the public and the planning board at their last two meetings. But Joe, do you want to walk everybody through kind of process-wise where we are, and then before Jim gets into that substance?
Yep. So you'll recall almost 2 months ago, we forwarded the plan to the planning board, asked them to review it for consistency with the master plan and provide us with any other comments or recommendations that they deem appropriate. The planning board met once. They did not reach a consensus on the question and did not take a vote. They had a subsequent meeting recently where they did reach a consensus at the meeting, and the attorney, Roger Thomas, took notes for the purpose of drafting a resolution that they will now consider at their next meeting. So you'll also recall that we had sent them a letter that acknowledged that there's a 45-day window within which they're supposed to respond to us. Outside that window, we can move forward without them. The wisdom of the mayor and the council was that's not a good idea. We still want to hear from them, even though they're out of time. I expressed that to them before the last meeting, urged them strongly to get back to us at the last meeting. They didn't succeed. So we're very hopeful that at their July meeting, they will consider the resolution that Mr. Thomas has drafted and provide it back to us. So with that being their timetable, that meeting unfortunately happens to be 2 days after our next council meeting, which would mean that we would not have this resolution in hand in time for our next council meeting. What we do have the benefit of is Terry, Jim, and myself attended both planning board meetings, and both of them were entirely consumed with the discussion on the draft plan. We all took copious notes, paid close attention. We left that meeting, as you know, began to prepare some responses and changes and amendments to the plan, anticipating what their resolution might look like as a way of attempting to be sort of ahead of the curve. And Jim, at the second meeting of the planning board, explained to the planning board that while they were voting on the plan that was in front of them, originally submitted 2 months ago, that we had a sense that the governing body would look favorably on some of their recommendations. And he walked through those recommendations that they would look favorably, that we think you will look favorably upon, and he's going to summarize them for you after I talk. So we got through that whole process, and now we're in a situation. What should you do next? Now, you could definitely, at your next council meeting, under the law, vote to introduce the plan with the changes that Jim's going to speak about, but without the resolution from the planning board. We're recommending that we don't do that. That instead we take up the introduction of the ordinance at our next redevelopment entity meeting, at which we can take official action. So we would give them the time to actually get the resolution voted on and provide it to us before we actually introduce the ordinance with the plan. We think that is consistent with our ongoing effort to be as flexible as we can with the receipt of comments and recommendations. And that schedule, while again it's well outside the 45-day, it's almost twice as long. It should put us in a position where we could then move forward with the introduction of the plan, which will address the comments that they have, that they will provide us in resolutions, but more importantly, that we heard at the meetings and that we've heard from the public since then. So our recommendation is to not take any action at the next council meeting, take action to introduce the plan at your next redevelopment entity meeting. And Jim will walk through with you the changes, high level, that we believe will address the planning board's concerns and the public concerns, albeit before we actually have the resolution, but we will have the resolution in time for the meeting. If that makes sense.
And one thing I'll just mention, that we have seen a draft of the resolution, but we know, it's still being looked over by the planning board members, prior to their meeting. And hopefully if there's an updated draft, they'll be willing to share that with us so that, we can be, as consistent with that as possible. But there may be a couple points that we aren't in perfect sync on, just to be clear, but if and when those points emerge, we'll have to just articulate why we've taken this action versus what they've put in their memo. So I think I think we've heard a lot of the feedback consistently, and hopefully Jim's overview will give you a really solid sense of where things are. I also apologize. I sent you the draft markup in advance of the meeting, and I recognize you may not have been able to scan it all in advance. Hopefully the overview Jim provides will enable you to then bounce back into that. And of course, if you have any questions, coming out of that, we can certainly explore that.
And just on the specific of the dates, so that our next council meeting is July 6th. The next planning board meeting is July 8th. Our next redevelopment meeting is July 13th. So at July 6th, we're not planning on putting forth any resolution on redevelopment. On July 8th, the planning board will memorialize their resolution, and then we will take that and ideally introduce on July 13th. So.
Right.
And if I could just, for the benefit of the rest of the council members, I think this is the best way for us to go, out of respect to the planning board, who has been spending a good deal of time talking about this and working on it with us and for us. So.
Agreed.
Okay, Jim.
Sure.
Right.
Terry?
I will. I'm doing the slide duties for Jim while he's on the road. All righty.
Thank you.
You should see the downtown redevelopment plan for tracks A to D image, if I've done my job.
Yes,
All right. Take it away.
sure. And speaking of time, I also wanted to emphasize, that we started this with in September of last year when the council authorized beginning this process. So It's been a process that's had a lot of opportunities to be shared and to receive feedback. If we can go forward one, Terry, I think one of the things I just wanted to mention as we look at the 4 tracks that you can see from this aerial view looking up Raritan Avenue, is we did emphasize as well in some of the discussion at the planning board that there's existing zoning, CBD zoning, PO zoning on a portion of Tract D that today permits under existing zoning as of right 4-story buildings. There's structured parking that appears to be permitted as well in the downtown. The ordinance could use some clarification on that, but there are provisions for parking structures and design standards for those as well. And the other thing that we don't have control over under the existing zoning, for instance, would be a potential individual property owner within these tracts that has no other access from a side street or a rear street to propose new curb cuts along Raritan Avenue, something that the 2003 master plan identified as a problem for a safety concern, identified as a problem in the 2005 redevelopment plan if that's not used, but we can't preclude someone from gaining access. So there's things that can happen under the existing zoning that perhaps could have outcomes that people don't realize. If we could go to the next slide, I'd like to just go over the proposed changes to the April 13th, the last draft that we had placed out there, and the one that was also referred to the planning board. The first was, and the most significant one, and one that drew a lot of public comment, community discussion, is the revisions will now eliminate the permanent street closure on North 3rd Avenue. So no Festival Street, no restriction in terms of vehicular movement, and a potential proposed parking structure on Tract D, which we'll show you in a moment, could have access from North 3rd, both directions. The second bullet refers to the fact that this also involves exploring the accommodation of the farmers market on South 3rd Avenue. That, however, is outside the limits of Tract D. It's not part of this plan. Plan won't go into any detail, and that's something that would need further exploration with Main Street. The next is we've clarified some issues surrounding parking, and we've amended the draft to basically clarify that the permitted accessory uses, when we're talking about parking, may provide spaces for residents of redevelopment projects, which is the primary purpose, to show you in the next slide. But as well, there can be some employee, customer, and even some limited public parking. All of that's referenced in the plan. We added clarification under the permitted accessory uses in that section. And then lastly, we brought in reference and the garage design guidelines that are in the 2005 redevelopment plan, and in fact referenced where the parking structures are permitted in the existing land development ordinance as well. If we could go to the next slide, please. This is just showing the fact that North 3rd in the top image will remain open, and we're really suggesting that town tables on South 3rd Avenue is the area that's been closed. It seems that traffic circulation has been working fairly well, and that should be explored further to perhaps be made the more permanent type of public space. And obviously, the New Jersey DOT has review of anything relative to the fact that this is on a state road. There still could be on North 3rd some sort of corner bump outs and things that could expand the usable pedestrian space from what exists today, that could be done in conjunction with redevelopment, perhaps on the former Blue Horse site on the left side of the photo. If we go to the next slide, I'll actually show you the sort of updated graphic that we've included in the revised plan that we shared at the planning board that shows the traffic remaining 2 ways on North 3rd. There were some concerns about access to some of the existing uses on North 3rd. This effectively does not affect the traffic pattern. There could be an occasional temporary closure of North 3rd that might be part of some event that's perhaps occurring on South 3rd, but the street would remain open. We also, there were questions raised about the parking structure and traffic related to North Third. And I just wanted to emphasize what has been in the redevelopment plan all along is that this parking structure is primarily to facilitate mixed-use redevelopment on all of the tracks, which we'll see in the next slide. But before we go there, I just wanted to also indicate that the liner space that you see facing North Third, which is on the ground floor of that parking structure, which we had referred to in text, but we hadn't shown graphically, is indicated here, combined with the proposed residential building facing Dennison Street. This was an issue discussed by the planning board, are the liners that basically don't allow for a lot of public exposure for the parking structure, which as we believe now will be somewhere on the order of 3.5 stories in height. So you don't see it from the street, and you can have active uses with ground floor space and entrances along the street, very walkable. Remember today, this is a surface parking lot that's completely visually exposed. And so that liner principle of wrapping the garage with buildings so that you don't see it is in fact what's contained in the 2005 redevelopment plan. And it's the same that's contained in the parking garage design standards that are contained in the existing zoning. So there's sort of an alignment, consistency, and we've just emphasized that further in the plan. If there were to be some portion of the parking structure that may be made available for public use, what we have always indicated in our presentations and is contained in the text of the redevelopment plan and has been, is that it would be limited on the ground floor, and that might be some sort of a shared parking condition to be determined. But this is not a public garage for customers. It's not a public garage for commuters. It doesn't have that sort of intensity of use. It is effectively parking for primarily the residential redevelopment, mixed use development, but that would be primarily residential that it's supporting on all of the tracks. If we go forward, one more slide, that are all located well within a 5-minute walk of this site where the garage is shown. So there you can see all of the tracks. So the garage is again primarily related to facilitating mixed use redevelopment and primarily to accommodate potential residents of those upper floor apartments. If we go forward, I just wanted to go over the final set of changes on Tract C, which is the site of the existing farmers market. We are now requiring a public plaza / green gathering space along Raritan Avenue and permitting multiple buildings. The prior draft had referred to having one courtyard building and a small plaza. So that's been expanded in terms of really what it's intended to achieve. We've also clarified that the redevelopment plan supersedes the existing land development ordinance. I think I had mentioned that back in April when we first looked at this. Had said it in one section. It now says it in both of the pertinent sections. It incorporates provisions of the 2019 pedestrian and bicycle plan. That was a recommendation from the planning board to boost it up. I'll go over those in a second. And then lastly, there's a whole variety of miscellaneous minor corrections, edits, revisions that have been made, nothing substantive. If we go to the next slide, this is Tract C. And basically what we've amended the plan to say is not an actual size, but to basically recognize that we want to achieve and maintain a public gathering space in the form of a plaza / green along Raritan Avenue at the front of this site. May not go the whole way across. The configuration would need to be determined, and that there could be multiple buildings on the site on what's referred to as Tract C. And then go to the last slide, which basically just includes the provisions that we have placed into the amended draft dealing with the 2019 bicycle and pedestrian plan. Well, the first is the plan recommends ensuring that new development includes appropriate bicycle and pedestrian accommodations. The plan actually already included that. And the second bullet, which talks about leveraging private development activity to advance elements of the PED bike plan. And again, these were in the plan. We've just re-highlighted them. There would obviously be streetscape improvements along any of these potential redevelopment tracks. That would involve filling in sidewalk gaps, particularly on Tract A, where there are numerous driveways, repairing existing sidewalks that would apply to all of the redevelopment tracks, modifying and eliminating existing driveway access, as I mentioned, particularly on Tract A. And then last, installing intersection roadway improvements. And we really think that the Raritan and 3rd intersection will be the place that probably can bring forth some of the crosswalk techniques and enhancements that are talked about in the PED bike plan. The next bullet refers to reinforcing the gateway effect, and the Tract A and B in this redevelopment plan across from each other on Raritan really envisioned as sort of a gateway into the downtown as you cross the bridge and come up the hill on Raritan Avenue. And we've suggested enhancing that with landscaping, seating, public art. Some of these things may occur out within the front of the property, into the public realm. And in fact, the next bullet could involve installing bike corrals. Now, again, this would be an NJDOT review, but we've talked about in the plan previously about allowing for some limited convenience parking for the residents of these buildings if they're parking in the parking structure that's a block or two away on Raritan. And we think combining that with bicycle parking in front of these buildings acts as traffic calming for the recommendation of the PED bike plan, also enhances the gateway effect. And then lastly, the bike PED plan talks about establishing preferred design standards for covered bicycle parking and incorporating that in redevelopment site plans. And in fact, we require covered bicycle parking, which we believe in most cases will be inside these proposed buildings in some way, or inside proposed buildings on these redevelopment tracks. And that is incorporated at one bicycle space per unit minimum. So that element of the PED bike plan is incorporated. So again, we've just sort of highlighted that degree of consistency and brought a few additional elements in to the amended draft. So that takes care of walking you through at a high level what we've amended in this draft.
Okay. Thank you, Terry. Any questions from council members on what you just saw? Comments, council members? Matt Hirsch?
Hey, just back to the parking again in the garage. I think I only realized fairly recently that this was a completely private structure suited for the for the what's proposed in the master plan. And I'm just wondering if there is any opportunity for any element of public parking, if that's something that we're considering.
Jim? Constantine?
Sure. I thought Joe was going to say something. Yeah, we've indicated that we think the ground floor could have that, and the example that I've referenced previously is a redevelopment project that's received full approval and is moving forward with full borough support in Heightstown, that both Mr. Bauman and our firm have worked on, and that parking structure, which is part of 400 downtown residences in a renovated rug mill and some new structures, includes a limited number of ground floor spaces because they're the most easily accessible to the public that can be used to support the downtown business district. In that case, they're seeing it really more as probably employee parking, but those are made available for, and it could be that in this case here as well, I think that's the solution that could occur, is that there's some portion of ground floor spaces that can be made available for public.
Let me just add that I don't want people to be confused. This is definitely not going to be only for residents, right? It's to be determined how this garage will be sized, who will go into it. That's part of the parking analysis. But I mean, if we just said it's just for residences, we may leave the opportunity for other revenues. So I think who will park in this is to be determined. Jim's point is always, it's not a commuter's garage, right? And it's not designed because we have a major problem for parking for retail down the downtown. It's designed to house residents, but that doesn't mean that it won't have multiple purposes. I'm certain it will.
And just, Matt, just to also add that the way that it's written is that there is provisions for some of that flexibility, but the underlying idea is that it's not a garage where you're going to have people going in and out constantly, right? It's the idea is that you're going to have people who might go in the morning, go to work, come back, park their car, and then walk all over Highland Park, right? Instead of driving back and forth and in and out. So that's the sort of primary focus, but there's clearly a lot of potential for, public parking, and that's part of the plan, so.
And
I was just responding to Jim's comment
Yeah.
about how this is going to be private parking, that's all.
Well, he did also say, but with this flexibility built in, I guess what I heard Joe say that I like to think about that I think is helpful is we wouldn't be suggesting the creation of the structure based on existing parking conditions in the borough, in terms of the parking demand needs. But if we're going to promote the downtown living that we want, we recognize we're going to have to find a place to put those cars, and a structured approach, parking garage approach, we believe in this centralized location has multiple wins to it. But I totally take your point, Matt. I think, but a lot of this is the exact composition is partially what our parking consultant will help us evaluate as we move our projects forward.
I think also it's important to understand that it's not sort of like if we build it, the people from out of town are going to come and park in it and on a hope and a prayer. It's going to be built primarily to be filled by the new residents that we would have in the downtown projects, with some additional parking spaces available for the public.
I'm just saying, I'm sure that the parking consultant will factor in, future redevelopment,
Right.
proposed structures, and they're going to want, and they will very likely have a proposal for some type of management, either in a structure or in other ways, however you capture parking. And that's so that, so if the plan anticipates that, that's good.
There's one other point that I'd like to underscore, because I don't think it gets enough discussion.
Joe, can you speak louder, please?
Yeah. So there's one other point that I'd like to underscore that I don't think gets enough discussion. And I've heard of, since I arrived in Highland Park, I've heard talk about eliminating curb cuts along Raritan Avenue, and that's been such a huge focus. Developing individual parcels without a centralized garage it's impossible to further that goal, right? If you're going to be parking on site, you need curb cuts at every site. A central garage furthers the desire to eliminate curb cuts. I know we don't really address that, but you sort of, you either have one or the other. If you're going to park on each site, you're going to need curb cuts to get in and out of each site off of Raritan Avenue primarily. But if you have a central garage, you can start getting rid of some of those curb cuts. And so the garage has the added benefit of reducing curb cuts.
One other
Well, I
benefit
wasn't arguing for on-site parking.
No, I know, Matt. I was actually responding to you, Jared, but just to the public more so.
I wanted to add on one other discussion point that occurred at the planning board was in fact that having that centralized parking also mitigates having, I'll call it, minor traffic hotspots with people parking more intensively on individual sites. That on Raritan Avenue, if you don't want the curb cuts, means that you're accessing them from neighborhoods. And in fact, part of our solution for Tract B is to eliminate what right now is vehicular access through Park Place, and sort of at the end of the stub and down an 8-foot alley that the residents supported, trying to eliminate, because any redevelopment on that site would have an impact into the neighborhood. So there's sort of a related issue on any of the tracks if you park them from the neighborhood versus trying to place parking in a place that we think has accessibility and less impact on each site.
People might want to park there when it snows.
There are other downtowns with parking structures, and there are folks that do put their cars in there when it snows.
Okay, any other questions or comments from the council members? All right. So then, at this point, we'll go into our public comment session. Each speaker has 3 minutes, but may comment on any topic. The borough clerk will monitor the time and will offer a 30-second warning and then indicate when 3 minutes has lapsed. The session will wrap up by 9 p.m. If you would like to speak, please raise your hand by pressing *9 on your phone keypad or select the raise hand button on the Zoom application. The borough administrator will announce your turn by reading out your name or the last 4 digits of your phone number. Please begin by telling us your first and last name, as well as your address. Again, if you would like to speak about a topic on the agenda, please press *9 or the raise hand button now.
All right, Mayor, it looks like we have 43 attendees at the moment and 5 hands raised, as I like to try to announce. And the first hand raised we have is Jeffrey Perlman. Please just state your name and address for the record.
Oh yeah, good evening, Jeffrey Perlman, 116 North 3rd Avenue. First of all, I want to thank thank you all for, as a member of the planning board, to have the resolution that's been drafted. I just saw today to have it come back to the planning board for review before the development plan is introduced on council. So thank you for that. Just one quick clarification there. I think there was not consensus among the planning board about at least tracks C and D. Some disagreement, at least for me and a couple other members of the planning board. But question on the parking RFP. Will there be, and can you, as you decide which consultant to use, to amend the deliverables to include an evaluation of bike and pedestrian issues in relation to a parking garage, for example? Because there is no deliverables related to bike and pedestrian impacts. There's deliverables related to specific parking impacts. So I was wondering if you have an opportunity to amend the deliverables before you go under contract.
Joe?
I mean, we could amend it. I'd have to think through what advice the parking consultant, whether they have the expertise, but yes, we could amend it.
Well, so I guess if there's a question that you can answer it, do any of the consultants under consideration have a bike and pedestrian expert? Any of the firms under consideration have that?
I don't know if they've gotten that far, Terry and Joe.
Yeah, I don't have the answer, Jeff. Sorry.
Okay. Well, maybe you can find that out. And typically you would get our resumes of people working on a project.
Mhm.
The other I guess question, and it's probably half question, half comment. I know I have 3 minutes. Just relates to the parking structure on parcel D, and what I'm hearing is still confusion about the use of this structure, potential structure. And I think, as Joe said, it's going to have multiple uses, and we don't know exactly what percentage will be for public and for residences. I understand the intent, but the redevelopment plan isn't going to be so exacting, it doesn't sound like, because of potential revenues. And so
30 seconds.
that is a concern that I have in the redevelopment plan. And then, obviously South Third is not in the redevelopment plan. So removing the farmers market, you can't say it's going to go South Third because it's not in the redevelopment plan. So it's an idea, but it's not actionable right now. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Thank you.
Okay, next.
Looks like Peter Spool is next. Please state your name and address for the record.
Yes, I'm Peter Spool. I live at 146 Graham Street. So I have a comment and then a question. So the comment is the Main Street Highland Park memo made it clear that both the space on North Third and even South Third Avenues was not enough to accommodate the farmers market. And they considered the farmers market an important activity in Highland Park. I agree with both of those things. So I wonder what other ideas might be thought about as a better location with more space. The other question is, Tract B is still rather small, and there's lots of underutilized properties right near it. I don't know why more effort wasn't made, and I wonder, and there's a question, why more effort isn't being made or more patience in trying to enlarge that tract. And I also wonder why the vacant lot next to the Blue Horse, why more effort maybe wasn't made to try to include that in the plan. Please answer those questions.
Okay, so let's take the first one. You mentioned the farmer's market. I know that Terry and Jim have been meeting with the Main Street organization to talk about that. Terry or Jim, do you want to address that?
I'll just briefly, yeah, we did meet out actually out in the field, so to speak, and the current thinking, although we have to reconvene with them to be, fair, was consideration for use of the area currently identified as town tables, as well as the municipal parking lot on South Third for the use of the farmers market on Fridays. There's still some details to be worked out with regard to access issues for that area, but we do think we have the beginning of a workable scheme, and that's what we'll be pursuing there. And there was at least some, I wouldn't say there was agreement, but there was at least some acknowledgement that it might be workable, and that's the direction we're headed. Ken, did I get that right, you think? You were
Correct.
Correct.
And then in terms of the other property owners, Highland Park, with one exception, has not been interested in taking people's property by condemnation.
Joe, I'm sorry, but can you speak louder?
Get rid of my video. Is that any better?
No, I think you just got to speak up.
All right. So Highland Park has generally been unwilling to use the power of condemnation, with one exception, to take people's property in furtherance of redevelopment. That means we need to have property owners that are prepared to work with us and or control the property ourselves. And so we've focused on properties where the property owner has expressed an interest in redeveloping their property, or we own the property and we want to redevelop it. The other parcels, we really look for property owners that are interested in redevelopment, and we've not been willing to impose redevelopment on property owners that are not interested in it.
Thank you, Joe.
Including more patience and better enticements, perhaps?
30 seconds.
The only thing I would say was the borough's been incredibly patient from its last redevelopment plan, and it didn't really serve us well. No redevelopment has really occurred over the last 15 years along Raritan Avenue. So we're really trying to focus on things we can achieve. Patience just hasn't really worked very well.
Well, and I would just add that we would welcome to have more discussions with people on some of the things that Peter mentioned, and have reached out and have had conversations, and those are going to continue on. And so moving forward with this redevelopment plan does not preclude future ones with other interested and willing participants. And I think one of the things that we're hoping is that as we are able to do, as Joe said, a redevelopment plan with places where we have an interested owner or we have ownership of a lot, others will say, I'd like to be a part of this. And that certainly could be something in a next phase, in phase 2 or phase 3, or moving down the line. So we're certainly interested. We're trying to get accomplished something at the beginning with areas that we have the most control over or most interested in, but are certainly interested in discussing and have been discussing with other property.
I wanted to add, if we, move forward with the realization of a centralized parking facility, we actually have something to also talk to some of these owners of these smaller properties that are basically constrained. They can't fit a building and parking on the site, and that may facilitate additional properties.
I think that's the wrong approach.
Thank you, Peter. Who's next?
It looks like, hold on, Daniel Stern Cardinal. State your name and address, please.
Hi, Dan Stern Cardinal, 221 Harper Street. Two very quick things for you. First, I just want to say I appreciate everyone's work. I like the slight revisions that we're seeing here. I especially like the switch from North Third to South Third for the community space. I really like that. I've been using those town tables a lot. We've been having dinner there. It's just a really great location. And the idea of having that in a more permanent state is really encouraging to hear. The second thing is I've been kind of on the fence about the parking garage. And I think you've convinced me. I think I've come around on it. And the reason being what I think it was what Jim just said is that for a lot of small properties, having needing to build on-site parking takes up so much space that it becomes prohibitive to be able to make anything else on the site that you can actually make a profit on. If you remove that requirement, then you can actually build something, whether it's living space or retail or both on that site, ideally both, given that we're talking about the business district, that makes it possible. It makes it economically feasible to build smaller developments, kind of piecemeal infill kind of stuff once the ball gets rolling. So I think I've kind of come around from being on the fence to being in favor of that central parking structure. And with the change from North Third to South Third as the kind of meeting place, then that removes the logistical difficulties of the traffic flow associated with the in and out there. So I just want to say I hope this continues to move forward. I wish it was moving forward faster, but I think it's moving along, and I'm encouraged by that. And thank you for all the work, and keep it up. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Dan. Okay, who's next?
Looks like Carl Prey. State your name and address for the record.
Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. It's Mary Forsberg, not Carl Prey. I find I'm very confused by all of this because everything is kind of a moving object. First of all of these people who say that small plots for new apartments and things, people will not want to park in a parking garage. They want to park where they live. And nobody in town that I talk to thinks that's a good idea. I'm curious if you talk to South Third to tell them that they're going to be permanently closed for something. I think that, people who moved here in the past and moved here recently are not going to move here if this goes through. I mean, this will be New Brunswick, this will be Metuchen, this will be Princeton. The other thing that I actually really want to talk about is I want to talk about the pilot plans that you will propose for all of these new developments. I just recently reread the April 16th, 2019 minutes where Attorney Bauman talked about the pilot program for 31 River Road. And in it, he says that they would have paid $249,000 in property taxes, but they're only going to pay $100,000 in the service charge. But that will increase by $300,000 to $370,000. And I'd like to know how you figure the math on that, because I have looked at it in a number of different ways. I've talked to a number of people who know things about pilot projects, and they do not believe that at any point in time, something that starts out as $100,000 is going to be $370,000. My one other question or point or something is that in the December 2019 master plan and land use element, only 39 people thought that Highland Park needed more parking in downtown. And nobody said that we needed 300 more apartments, so we needed huge development on Raritan Avenue. 3 months after you approved the land use element and the master plan, you signed a contract with LRK, Mr. Constantine's firm, hiring
30
him
seconds.
to do a feasibility study on how many people you could pack on Raritan Avenue in order to make it financially feasible to do a parking garage. It seems to me that you have decided to build a parking garage and you're going to do it no matter what. And I don't think, the fact that you're taking parking away from Tract B and putting it on Tract D, which is also a residential area, in case you don't know, is not
Time.
really making things
Thank
better
you,
for
Mary.
everybody in town.
Thank you. Okay,
Next person up is Alvin Chen. Please just state your name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Alvin Chen. My address is 31 South 3rd. Okay, I'd like to respond to one of the points that the previous speaker raised, and I'm really excited about the idea of making permanent closures on my street. I'm excited about putting the farmers market there. I'm glad that the public parking lot off of South 3rd is being considered as a place for the farmers market. I would like to have some assurance that the uses and the public space by the church, the farmers market area, will be able to continue in whatever place that is selected after development happens. So for example, the outdoor movie nights, which are really nice use of the space and build some of the community activity spirit. The other issue that I have is is related to the financing of some of these redevelopment projects, including payments in lieu of taxes and tax abatements. I'd like to know that we're not shortchanging some of the public institutions like the schools that rely on property tax revenue, even though it may not be a large portion overall. If this pattern continues for redevelopment, I'd be leery about an excessive number of pilots along Raritan Avenue. Finally, I'd like to know that I'd like to be assured that the parking consultant is going to consider the cost of the parking garage and the way to pay for it, whether it's through some parking authority or through a public-private partnership. I believe that a parking consultant named Gerard Giosa has said it's like $21,000 per space for parking garages. And I'm just concerned about how long that will be hanging over the borough, if in fact the borough is in any way responsible for that cost.
okay, thank you, Alvin. Attorney Joe Bauman, do you want to address? I know there were a lot of things packed into that. Let's start from the last one going back. The cost of the parking garage.
So 21,000 a space is a good number. I mean, it's pretty, could be 20, could be 25. It's depends, right? So that's a working number that's not out of the realm of possibility. It's an industry number that we think about. And then there's an operating number that we also use. There'll be pro formas, both Jerry Giosa and the who he mentions and the other respondents are all more than capable of helping us to figure out how to build a garage, how much the garage will cost, how to pay for it, and how to support it. So we are counting on them to give us that kind of advice to when and if we need it. The parking garage consultant's basic job is going to give us a baseline, right? What is it like today? And that's why we're probably going to have them start in September and October, not in August, when people are on vacation and you don't really get good counts. And then once with that baseline, we're going to use that to apply it to individual projects. So we see this consultant as sort of an ongoing assistant once the baseline is built and once we have good understanding in terms of everything, including what a garage might cost and how to pay for it and pro forma associated with it. So yes.
Joe, do you also want to talk a little about the cost of the garage and the individual developments and how that would play into the cost?
Yeah, so I mean, things we have to pay for the garage would be possibly the developers paying for spaces in the garage. So that's an annual fee. We may do a payment in lieu of parking, which would be an upfront fee that would offset the actual construction. We've considered using pilot money to pledge it. If we sell some land, the land proceeds could be used towards it. So we're looking, there's, the possibility of the federal infrastructure money may have some ability to pay for garages. So we're going to pull out every possible source and be as creative as we can. These are all things we've done all over the state, in Cranford and Metuchen and New Brunswick. So we're going to use all the tools Bloomfield that we've seen in other places to pay for garages. Garages generally, don't pay for themselves. So you have to come up with other sources. You can't sell enough spaces to pay for the debt service on the garage. That's pretty much true unless you're in New York City. So we will have to be creative about how we pay for it, including money from developers.
And remember that as we're conceptualizing the primary use of the garage, it is that the developers, their tenants or their spaces, they would be parking there. And so it's sort of more reasonable that they would front some of the cost. And so as Joe said, there's a whole host of tools that we can use for paying this. But as that is conceptualized of having a primarily focused for the apartment dwellers, that's part of this process. So I just wanted to make sure that was there.
And the only other point I'd want people should think about the investment we may or may make into this as an investment in our economy, the same way you invest in a bridge or a road or in your educational system. Investing in your downtown is another form of investment that is designed to bear fruit for generations to come. So if we had to pay for part of the garage out of a bond issue, for example, you have to think of that as like paying for a bridge or a road or paying for your educational system. It's another way to invest public dollars to jumpstart your economy, your downtown economy. So it's an investment that we would be considering. But again, it's way too soon to know how we're going to do it.
Okay. Was there another question that Alvin asked?
I mean, he stated some preference regarding, or some interest in some assurances regarding the programs that are currently running on
Right.
Tract C. And that has been part of our conversations with Main Street, the outdoor movie theater in particular. So that's certainly on our minds. And part of what we're trying to figure out is where can we accommodate what and what spaces is needed where to do that. And that's exactly, we're on the same page with that. And that's the conversation we're having. And then I think that was it. That's the only other thing I wrote down anyway, sorry.
All right, and I also want to thank Mr. Chen for his open-mindedness about the closing of South Third and how active a location that has been for all of our residents. Okay, do we have another hand?
Yeah, I'll just let you know we are at 5 hands at this point and 43 attendees. Next up is Marcia Schiffman, speaking of Main Street Highland Park. Marcia, state your name and address. You need to unmute yourself.
Yes, good evening. My name is Marcia Schiffman. I live at 131 North 6th Avenue. I'm a member of Main Street and also a member for many, many years of the Main Street Design Committee. We had submitted a fairly detailed report in May, and we have been working with some of the borough officials on addressing some of our concerns, which is appreciated. But I wanted to discuss for the record specific concerns that we'd like to have considered as part of the plan. And I know Mr. Constantine said that the plan won't go into any detail regarding the farmers market or other aspects. But I think it's important that it be part of the record and hopefully considered as part of the plan, because Main Street is such an important public operation for the borough. Specifically, we had presented spaces and sizes of spaces to accommodate Main Street's current operation. That included 18,000 square feet that we need to accommodate our current farmers market clients, not expanding it, but the 60 some clients that we have now. South Third Avenue works, but we don't think it will. There are issues in terms of having meeting enough space, and that really has to be looked at in much more detail. And also the street will need to be rebuilt and redesigned, and that's a cost. There should also, we had talked about a link to through the Rite Aid parking lot, which we think is very important. Regarding the Borough Square, the Borough Green, we're pleased that it's now being considered in the place that it was shown in the 2019 master plan and land use plan. And it's along Raritan, generally in its current location. To meet all of the needs, and I appreciated what Mr. Chen said, the Main Street supports many, many operations, not just
30 seconds.
And we need 8,000 square feet to accommodate them, which should be designed into the master plan. Also, we need space for storage, and that's being removed as part of the development of Tract D. 800 square feet of public storage space is needed nearby, and we could see that being built in one of the buildings that would go on the site as part of the negotiation with the redevelopment. And finally, 600 square feet for a visitor center, Main Street office, public activity space indoors, possibly in one of the buildings on Tract C as well.
Marcia, I'm going to have to cut you off because of the 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Looks like the next speaker is Jerome Langer. Please state your name and address for the record. You may need to unmute yourself on your end. Mr. Langer, you should be able to speak if you unmute yourself. All righty, I'm gonna, Mayor, move on unless you tell me.
I finally got it.
There you go. I almost gave up on you.
I embarrassed Jerome Langer. It's really Pam Dorman.
Oh, hi, Pam.
So I'm at 423 South Fifth Avenue. One piece about South Third. The previous speaker mentioned there would need to be some reconfiguration of what currently exists. And I wonder about the residents who are sort of in back of town tables and how with the farmers market, whether they will still have access to their driveways. But I wanted to talk about the parking deck, a couple comments. The idea that this is parking for a structure that's going to be a 5-minute walk away. I know that that exists in major cities, that people can't park exactly where they live and they pay to park somewhere nearby. That sounds odd to me for a small town, but it's true, there is no other parking for them near where they would live, but I think that's a part of a problem in the building. So I question that. The other thing is in terms of the appearance of that parking deck, we've talked about what it would look like on Third and a little bit about what it would look like on Denison, although I've heard from some Denison residents that looking out their window to something quite big is different, but they don't have a beautiful view right now, but at least they have straightaway. But then on the Like, would that be the east side of the parking deck? In other words, not the south third side, but the other side of it abuts a residence and yard, and it abuts a business. And I hope there's some consideration for those people. And then a last piece that's been brought up in other situations is the impact of many more residences or many more residents on our sewer system in town. And just hope people are thinking about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Okay, do we have another hand?
It looks like we have Laurel Kornfeld. Please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, Laurel Kornfeld, 106 North 6th Avenue. So I was very happy to hear that the borough has no intention of using condemnation on any properties, but I did hear, if I heard correctly, the phrase except for one. What property is that the borough is thinking about using eminent domain to take, and where is it located?
So I don't remember who mentioned anything about.
That was me.
I
Mayor.
think Joe was talking about in the past. He was definitely not talking about anything now, Laurel.
Right, in the past, we, not related to the project we're doing now, in the past, we authorized condemnation, which we have not used, on 2 landlocked parcels of property that are undevelopable by, over behind the Gun and Boat.
But
Okay.
that has not happened. That's not being thought of, that's not in the works now, is it?
Correct, it's not.
Not currently, no, but we did authorize.
Okay, I still wanted to add that I think the farmer's market current site is, serves a purpose. It's one of those things where if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And it should just be kept with that beautiful new pavilion as the farmer's market site. It would save a lot of grief and a lot of studies. People love it where it is. Finally, I guess I want to ask for both adoption of the redevelopment plan and for any bonding necessary, because these policies have major impact on residents, on everybody who lives in town. Would you consider putting both the plan itself and any bonding to a public referendum in a November election? Not necessarily this year, but in a future election.
The redevelopment law prohibits referendums on these issues.
Is that the state law?
Yeah.
What about the bonding?
There's a process if people want a referendum.
Okay. What would you consider it?
It's not up to us, it's up to the public.
Okay.
The process, you have to follow the process.
I'm sorry, could you just, I can't hear you.
There's a process under the law that has to be complied with. If people want to.
So it has to be initiated by the public.
30 seconds.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else?
We have 4 hands, one of which has my name associated with it, which is not me, but we'll figure out who that is when we get there. So it looks like Sasha Rudy is up next. Please state your name and address for the record.
Sasha Rudy, 247 Cleveland Avenue. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I think the plan has been refined really well and makes more sense now. My only concern is that the community spirit remains with events and a farmer's market of an appropriate size being in a central location and not tucked away somewhere. Having purchased here in October 2020, Main Street Highland Park was a major factor in the decision. I think other prospective buyers and renters will find it important too. To echo a previous commenter, the current spot where it's at, it seems like the best spot in my opinion. So that's it.
Thank you, Sasha.
Hold on 1 second, sorry. I don't do it in a specific order, I get screwed up, excuse me. Looks like Rob Roslowitz is next. State your name and address for the record, please.
Hello, Rob Roslevich, 123 Magnolia Street. And first off, I'd like to say, Terry, thank you so much for saying that you are looking for an appropriate size space in terms of redevelopment for the farmer's market lot. And I'm glad to hear that you're considering that. But at the same time, my concern is that I think that the farmer's market lot, being a successful space, would suffer horribly from trying to be moved to a different space rather than taking what is already working and working on improving it within a current redevelopment plan. I think right now, looking at having a modest component or modest public space within that area is short-sighted, and that we need to invest in something that's already working and maintain it. We've heard that it needs a very large area. I don't think the South Third location would be large enough for the movie nights and or for the farmers market, and that we already have a space that can be improved, as opposed to looking at creating a small space here and then other small spaces throughout town. I think there's a large component in terms of investing in public space that needs to be considered. Another thing, and maybe I heard you wrong, but I heard a parking garage consultant or a parking consultant. I just want to make sure that we're looking at having a parking consultant and not a parking garage consultant, because I think we want to look at parking, not at parking garages. I do have a concern also that when we're looking at the language that was presented by Jim, he said that we may allow other uses other than the parking for the residents from tracks A, B, and C. I think that that language should be will allow, because if we're having a parking space that's only for these residents of these other locations, that just looking at it for the benefit of eliminating some curb cuts by having a centralized parking that everyone has to walk to, doesn't really provide enough benefit for having this centralized parking. And then I did have one more comment, but I'm trying to find my notes. Oh, my concern also is that we're looking at this parking garage and the potential
30 seconds.
And the potential on future development, particularly for some smaller spaces. Does that mean that we're going to save some spaces in this garage for future developments? Or are we putting ourselves into a plan where all future developments, even for small spaces, rely on having future parking garages in town for future developments?
Okay. I think we'll be able to address that better when we do get the parking study, Rob. It's a parking study that we're doing. Not a
Parking consultant, not a parking garage consultant.
Right.
However,
right.
one of the deliverables will be the evaluation of the garage financial viability and ways we would pay for it. But it really is about management in the downtown area as currently scoped.
So, and just let me also add, the curb cut elimination is not the purpose for the garage. It's a benefit of the garage. The purpose of the garage is to provide for more opportunity for people to live and spend money in the downtown. That's the purpose of the garage, not for curb cuts. So we're clear.
Thank you, Joe.
Mayor, I see 3 hands, one of which has spoken already. Should I, oh wait, that person has de-handed themselves, for lack of a better. So shall I call upon myself to speak and see who it really is?
Yes,
Next?
why don't you, if that's the next hand up.
Yes, it is.
Very
The person who's coming up is Terry Hover. Please state your actual name and address for the record.
What if it were you, Terry?
It's not my
David
husband,
Lynch
is
movie.
it?
It's like a David Lynch movie.
Terry Hover.
Terry?
I was gonna guess it was Alan Williams because I know you use it for our boards and committee meetings.
That's correct. 319 Harrison Avenue.
Hi, Alan.
Hello. The Reformed Church acts as a community center as much as the community center does. And what is the minimum number of parking that is going to remain in the municipal parking lot if the development goes ahead?
So Alan,
currently there's 72 spots.
So Alan, all along, we've been in communication with Pastor Seth at the Reformed Church, So, you know, anything that we work on, he's going to be a part of the discussion as far as it concerns parking.
Can anybody be more specific than that?
He has not given us the number of spaces he needs yet from us.
Okay, I mean, there's over 30 organizations that meet there on a regular basis.
Right,
Okay, thank you.
thanks. Okay, is there
It
another?
looks like I have one last hand and it's coming up as Jamie. They are using it. I'm going to have to promote this person to panelist. Jamie, please be advised your camera may come on briefly. I will disable it as quickly as I can. So please ready yourself, because when I promote you to panelist, I find that cameras come on for some reason. So be prepared. And I am now promoting you to panelist. And
hi, thanks for the warning.
you're welcome. And thank you for whatever you did that I don't seem to think we have your
I'm
video.
not sure. I apologize.
So please state your full name and address. for the
Sure.
record.
Jamie Belantia, I'm at 515 South First. We heard this evening, and not for the first time, that, you know, redevelopment plans, particularly this one, are an investment in the town, an investment in the downtown. And I just kind of want to put a finer point on the idea that the thing that we're investing in is, in a sense, the product is renters. And I want to make sure that we're hearing from renters during these discussions. The last number I'm aware of is that about 60% of Highland Park is renters. Many of us are very long-term renters. And in terms of being able to have a future here, we need to be talking I think at all stages in the redevelopment plan about affordability. Highland Park doesn't currently have rent control, for instance. I find that very concerning. You know, we have a wide variety of types of landlords, you know, from very large multi-million-dollar companies to like mom and pop types who maybe rent out part of a building. I realize there's not a one-size-fits-all approach that might work for this, but I just want to be clear. You know, I'm personally in favor of high-density housing, if and only if that housing is safe and affordable. I don't want to just have us meet the minimum requirements for affordable housing. I want to see us be a community that exceeds that and ensures that that housing is available and is an attractive place to be for years to come. So
Jamie, I will tell you that most of the members of the council would agree with you on that. Right now, we have an ordinance that requires that if we are developing rental units, and I always get these two numbers confused, so somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but if we are developing rental units, 15% of them must be affordable units. And if it's for sale, it's 20%. And that is over and above any requirements that I'm aware of, if there are any, on a state level. So yes, you know, we will always be looking for the same thing you have been asking about. Thank you.
Okay, I believe, let me just go back. I had to put her back as an attendee. Make sure I did that properly. And it looks like there are no further hands, Mayor.
Okay, then seeing no more public comment, may I have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
And just a reminder, everybody should have gotten an email from me with the link for that. So just make sure you go find it.
We have to go off here and.
Correct, and we'll rejoin in a separate meeting.
I don't think I got one.
Oops, I forgot you, Jennifer. I'll forward it to you real quick.
Thanks a lot.
Mayor, just as a clarification for the public, we're going into an executive session and then the meeting is closed after that. Is that right? So I just want to make sure that we don't, people don't expect us to be coming back or they should be holding on. I just want to make sure they know that we're adjourning this portion of the meeting to go into executive session.
Thank you for that clarification.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you for your comments, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.